Why isn't Jim McMahon now calling for the resignation of Abdul Jabbar? I'll tell you why. It's because of the postal votes he provides to him. It's because of the bloc Muslim vote that Abdul Jabbar and the OBA cartel control.
Do not fear them. Do not fear any of them. On the 20th of November 2003, James Ignatius O'Rourke McMahon was elected councillor for the Failsworth East Ward of Oldham. Deeply ambitious, he ruthlessly rose to power, and by 2011 he was already leader of the council. In 2015, exploiting a Labour Party loophole, he became MP for Oldham West and Royton. If only the people of the town knew then what they now know. Do not fear them. Do not fear any of them.
All I heard on the news was Boris is going to have to resign. This party, that party, the Prime Minister's done this, someone else has done that. And I'm really, really sorry. I'm not I'm not a Boris fan. I'm not a Conservative government fan, if I'm honest with you all. And I looked at it, and it was on the radio. I turned on my laptop. It's on every bloody news channel. And I'm thinking, what on earth's going on? And I weren't feeling well. And then bloody Jim McMahon, brother Jamal, pops up with his "he must resign." Whilst people in Oldham were having the toughest restrictions throughout the pandemic, the Prime Minister must resign. Context. Here he is. MP calls for PM to resign, citing Oldham's tough restrictions. Oldham West and Royton MP Jim McMahon has reiterated the Labour Party's call for Prime Minister Boris Johnson to resign by citing Oldham's tough restrictions throughout the pandemic. I cast my mind back to the time when here in Oldham we were under much tighter rules than almost anywhere else in the country, even our neighbours with similar rates of infection. People of Oldham didn't just ignore the rules as unfair as they may have seemed at the time, so the Prime Minister has no excuse for the seemingly endless parties at Downing Street during lockdown. We took the rules in good faith and followed them because we thought we were doing the right thing and helping the spread of the infection. I presume he means helping limit the spread of the infection, but it is brother Jamal. The public have made up their mind. The Prime Minister is not fit for the job, so he must do the right thing, as Oldhamers did when they followed the rules, and resign. Not my words. You seen that? Quote, Oldham Times, not my words. Our leader was in Tenerife on a secret holiday with his girlfriend, trying to release pre-prepared press releases, trying to disguise he was away. He mocked us all when he came back. He went on walks and trips with his girlfriend, ignoring the rules. Somewhere during the pandemic, Arud Shah went on holiday. And we also, why did they call him BMP Pete? Sean Fielding, BMP Pete, Angela Rayner, claiming they were out on an emergency litter pick in the sandals, broken glass everywhere. So I'll take my dog. The press won't pick up on that. But we get all that, yeah? All of that took place. But he must resign, people in Oldham. Yeah, that's Jim McMahon this week. He must resign. And I know we've all got to be better and we've all got to, try and become the politicians and be the change we want to see in the world. I get all that. But there are moments like this when I truly despair. Because the hypocrisy is just astonishing. On the 28th of July 2020, a man called Roger Tinker sent an email to Shahid Mushtaq and every councillor in the council. You can see it there, every Labour council, every independent. You can see Arood Shah's name there, Chris Goodwin, Howard Sykes, Hazel Gloucester, Chris Gloucester, Abdul Malik, Ruji Surjan, Count Colin McLaren, Eddie Moores, Elaine Taylor, Clint Piffian, Hannah Roberts, Jean Stretton. You can see them all. Louis Hamblett, Naila Ibrahim, they're all there. You can see, yeah, you can see that. You don't need me up there. Let me get this up full so you can see it all full. Dear Councillor, having thought that disease was being defeated and life could slowly return to a semblance of normality, it was concerning to hear this lunchtime's announcement that measures are now having to be taken to curb the rapid rise of COVID-19 infections in Oldham. The people of Oldham have sacrificed many things and forgone the pleasure of seeing family and friends since the introduction of the coronavirus regulations in March. I have no doubt that the majority of people in Oldham will continue to respond positively to help stem the spread of the virus. If only the same could be said of the elected members of the council. Throughout the lockdown period, Cllr Jabbar received visitors in excess of the regulations at his home. The number of visitors on the 23rd, 26th of May and 2nd of June were of grave concern to his neighbours. Attached are copies of the emails sent to Cllr Jabbar and his response. An email was sent to Cllr Jabbar on the 3rd of June expressing our disappointment that he had chosen to disregard the regulations. Copies were also sent to Jim McMahon MP and Sean Fielding. Jim McMahon was concerned about the abuse of the regulations and requested the Oldham Labour Group Chief Whip, Councillor Elaine Taylor, to review the allegations. Since initial contact with Councillor Taylor to ask about the format of the inquiry and the provision of additional information, we have had no feedback on its progress. Councillor Jabbar's response to our request for him to desist from receiving visitors, attached, was only received after the intervention of Councillor Taylor. The reasons given by the councillor for the visitors are directly opposite to the advice given at the time for the strict limitations of visits to our homes. Given the health conditions set out in the councillor's response, he should have had sole visitors bringing doorstep deliveries of food and medicine. It was not essential that he was visited by a family of a mother and 4 children, playing games in the garden, entering his home and taking group photographs on the front lawns. During these visits, a second vehicle arrived carrying additional visitors. He also received a visit from a young couple, together with a babe in arms. There were other occasions when multiple visitors were present, but these were not witnessed by multiple neighbours. In his response, Cllr Jabbar refers to underage children. His daughters are aged 17 years and 9 years approximately. The elder one, I understand from another neighbour, has just begun driving lessons. On the 26th of May, one of the occasions when the family of 4 children arrived, Councillor Jabbar was appearing in a broadcast on Probash Bangla TV, interviewing Professor Adrian Martineau, Professor of Respiratory Infection and Immunity at Queen Mary's University of London, about the dangers of COVID-19 and the need to prevent its spread. A case of do as I say, not as I do. So there is unequivocal evidence that the deputy leader of Oldham Council, Cllr Abdul Jabbar, paid complete disregard to the COVID rules, and his actions were witnessed by multiple concerned neighbours. Jim McMahon, who wants the Prime Minister to resign, is fully aware of Jabbar's actions. And do you know what they did? No resignation calls from my brother Jamal, because he knows where the samosas are the tastiest. He knows where the sacks of postal votes are the heaviest. So he's ordered an internal Labour Party investigation. We all know about internal Labour Party investigations. Sean Fielding had one, remember? And the chief whip of the Labour Party is a disgraceful, disgusting, despicable woman called Councillor Elaine Taylor, Chadderton Central. This is the councillor who sits on the governing body of Radcliffe School and helped cover up with the nonsense lessons have been learned fiasco, which resulted in the head teacher ignoring the sexual assault on a child who consequently tried to commit suicide. How that story has not made the national news, I find it astonishing, particularly in the context of how that idiot Manchester United footballer did what he did to that poor girlfriend of his today. And what she had to resort to. I think the fact that she had to resort to putting it out on social media herself shows the level of protection these bastards get. It's the same in Radcliffe School with Elaine Taylor and her fellow Chadderton councillors, as a child attempted suicide after being sexually assaulted by a fellow student that the school covered up for, and then put the boy back in the class with the girl. So Elaine Taylor is the Labour Party chief whip. Resign, remember? Resign, resign, resign. Elaine Taylor writes back to Mr. Tinker. Further to your email, and for avoidance of doubt, any conduct issues relating to Oldham Labour Group is a matter for the Labour Group Chief Whip, and therefore I am solely responsible for dealing with this matter. No, you are not solely responsible for dealing with this matter. You are responsible for referring Jabbar to the police. You are responsible for suspending Jabbar. Instead, Elaine Taylor covers it up like she covers up what is tantamount to child abuse in a school. For those of you who don't know, this is what Councillor Elaine Taylor looks like. That's on the council webpage. That's her phone number. I presume that's her home phone number. If you live in a ward, if you live in Chadderton Central, you might want to phone her up and ask her what her role was in the cover-up at Radcliffe School, and what she's doing with Councillor Jabbar. I have already accepted written evidence regarding the alleged breaches in order to establish a fact-finding exercise. But gathering information as opposed to spreading it would be more useful in this regard. Who does she think she is? Fact-finding information, my arse. Cover up. Cover up. All you knew. Elaine Taylor, were you involved in the cover-up of the grooming and gang rape of our town's children? Wouldn't surprise me at all. Wouldn't surprise me at all. I want to reassure you that the Labour Party takes any accusations of this nature extremely seriously. But taking the time to investigate properly and conclude matters correctly is a fundamental part of how we deal with complaints responsibly and fairly. Bollocks! You cover-up merchants. I must also stress that in balancing the interests of all parties, the detail of any internal investigation will always be treated as restricted information. Therefore, it is not appropriate for me to discuss progress or case details with you. How about outcomes, Elaine Taylor? Oh no, you're a Oldham councillor. What do you lot know about outcomes? As you may recall, I did write to explain that it would take some time to conclude the investigation. I have not been able to confirm how long the decision-making process will take, as for reasons I'm sure you'll understand. No, I don't understand any of these reasons. These are unprecedented times, yes, where we turn a blind eye to the grooming and gang rape of our children. And we are all working hard at making sure that the postal votes continue. And Abdul Jabbar is central to securing Jim McMahon in his re-elections. Well, no. The last bit I made up. So what's the outcome, Elaine Taylor? He clearly did it. Why isn't Jim McMahon now calling for the resignation of Abdul Jabbar? I'll tell you why. It's because of the postal votes he provides to him. It's because of the bloc Muslim vote that Abdul Jabbar and the OBA cartel control. These people turned a blind eye to the grooming and gang rape of children. Telecars is based on top of the Westwood East. The Westwood East entire building is owned by the Jabbar family. They co-owned the taxi firm that were involved in grooming and gang raping children. And no, Jabbar is not up for election in May. Do you know why? He won last May with 72 votes or 76 votes or whatever it was. And the loser, Montaz Azad, took him to the High Court. The High Court decided there was a case to answer because the council admitted that they had helped rig an election. The council's chief executive admitted it in writing. Her excuse was they hadn't rigged it enough. But before the High Court came along, the witnesses disappeared. Thank you. 71 votes. And you know what? There are heroes in this story. Montaz is a hero. £50,000 he's had to pay. But that £50,000 confirmed what we all knew. The council had been actively involved in using its systems and processes to rig elections. And he should be sacked. But it gets worse. It gets worse for Councillor Abdul Jabbar, because news is coming to me that the lawns outside his lavish mansion. Am I allowed to use the word mansion? They claim I live in a mansion. Some of you have been in my little flat. So in the context, anything with lawns is a mansion for me. in his mansion somewhere in Chadderton. He's got so much grass and trees. The story goes, is Councillor Jabbar's grass has been regularly maintained by Oldham Council's groundsman. The trees in and around his house and his buildings and the grass and all the rest of it has been maintained by the council groundsman. He's been making full use of council resources that he has no right to, according to the sources that have given me this information. Yeah. You need to understand, these people are so powerful because of the bloc vote they control. In the late 90s, mid-90s, late 90s, yeah, mid-late 90s, late 90s, Lee Cook's on here, she'll tell you, I worked for the council. I did community work, I run youth centres all over the town. And do you know what the lot in Westwood were known as? Jabbar, his brother Abdul Karim, who was someone senior in the chief exec's department until he got sacked or moved on, basically named in the Ritchie report for corruption. They were known as the Mafia. They were known as the Westwood Mafia. Why do you think the council secretly funded the mosque? Why do you think the council didn't want to get involved when the chairman of the mosque was exposed as a convicted sex offender? Why do you think? All the historic buildings in Chadderton were sold to the chairman of the youth wing or the OBA at a discount rate. So the cutting of his grass you'll have to ask Mr. Tinker. For the truth of what I'm hearing. But going off what Jim McMahon has said, Councillor Elaine Taylor needs to publish that report. And if it's confirmed, as the evidence clearly shows it is, because Abdul Jabbar admitted it, then Abdul Jabbar must resign. And Jim McMahon must call for the resignation of Abdul Jabbar. And if Jim McMahon does not call for the resignation of Abdul Jabbar, then his hypocrisy is clearly demonstrated to everyone in this town. And his fear of upsetting the bloc Muslim vote controlled by the OBA cartel is there for everyone to see. Because if he wants the Prime Minister to resign, and I'm going to take McMahon's words on face value, people of the town were suffering at the time. We were following the rules. So if McMahon believes all of that, then he has to call for the resignation of Abdul Jabbar. And if he refuses to call for the resignation of Abdul Jabbar, it just demonstrates how bent he is, how corrupt he is, and why it wouldn't surprise any one of us that he, if he can do this, he sure as hell can turn a blind eye to white children being sold in exchange for votes. And the white children being sold in exchange for votes, for those of you who joined me during the week when I was doing some of my thinking on the little whiteboard thing next to me, that's not from me, or it's not just from me, it's from a senior government advisor, Alexis J. CBE, who's the chairman of the independent inquiry into child sex exploitation. She's the one who said it. And all I'm looking at is what she said I am seeing in Oldham. What's the point? What's the point? They're above the law. They can do what they want. Do you think I'm sharing with you something that the other councillors don't know from the other parties? Do you think you've seen the email I put up? That email went to every councillor. The Lib Dems know. The Conservatives know. FIP know. All of Labour know. You all saw that disgraceful picture of them all with Arud Shah attacking us. Snouts in the trough. What else is it? What else is it? Do as we say, not as we do. And if we get caught, Councillor Elaine Taylor, as Chief Whip of the Labour Party, will cover it up. Or whoever's the whip of the Lib Dems for Howard Sykes, when he leaked all that information to Neil Wilby, will cover it up. Same with the Conservatives, no doubt there's someone there for Graham Sheldon. Councillor Arud Shah, of course, has an opportunity here. She's meant to be in charge, isn't she? Is she not meant to be the leader of the council? Is she not meant to be in charge? Well, I'm sorry, if I was in charge of Oldham Council right now and coming up to an election where I risked being defeated, and my deputy was exposed for flouting rules while some of us were not allowed to watch and hold the hands of our loved ones as they died. Well, if I was Arud Shah, I'd sack Abdul Jabbar right now. I'd sack him. I'd say I'm in charge. This behaviour is completely unacceptable. It's wrong. That people were dying alone and loved ones couldn't see them. It's wrong that so many of us made so many sacrifices. My mum was having chemo. I think I shared with you. I saw this woman practically, wasting away in front of me. I'd go and stand outside her house with a flask in my hand. As my sister, who looked after her, would bring her either to the bottom of the stairs, carry this skin and bones practically to the bottom of the stairs because she wanted to see me and that's the closest I'd go. Was stood outside on the other side of the wall. Or did open the window at the top. And even though we all thought she was dying, we didn't break the rules. But here's Abdul Jabbar, the deputy leader of the council, doing whatever he wants. So if I was the leader of Oldham Council, I'd sack him. Not just because it's the right thing to do, but I'd sack him because it's the politically right thing to do. She's at risk of getting thrown out of Chadderton South. With all of her shenanigans exposed, she needs to demonstrate she's in charge, not the mobsters, not Jim McMahon, not the cartels. What better way than taking out a kingpin and sacking him? She won't sack him any more than Sean Fielding would have sacked her, because neither Sean Fielding's in charge or Arud Shah is in charge. We know who's at that top.
Do not fear them. Do not fear any of them.